Once we have some outlets in our UI, we need to be able to access them. For instance, we have made a button and we want something to happen when our user interacts with that button. So to do that, we have to expose some of our UI components to our code. Let's see how we're going to do all of that. I'm going to head into Xcode. And for now and for the first few lessons, I'm actually going to keep this window, which is our launcher window. But just keep in mind that after a while, I won't be using this window. I would simply go ahead to File, New Project, or hit Command Shift and N. In any case, I'm going to start a new project, new Xcode project. In the new Xcode project, I'm going to go up here. I'm going to say I want an iOS application and I want an app. Keep in mind that almost for every single application in this course, I will start from here. So you can put this as your default mode, which by selecting it, you automatically do that. If we needed another type, I will definitely remind you and I will make sure that I mention that. If I don't, it means we're going to make an app. So here I'm going to make an app. And in here, like we discussed earlier on in one of our lessons, you have to give a name to your application. I'm going to call this Access UI Outlets or anything that you want. If you do have a team, you have to assign it. Otherwise, you can leave it as none. You have to put an organizational identifier. If you don't have a domain, you can just put this as com.example. It doesn't really matter what you put in there. It's simply a way for you to make sure that your application stays unique. So basically this name, this bundle identifier, becomes a unique name. Interface, we're going to use a storyboard, and then language is going to be Swift, and I'm going to put this back to my default name, com.institute. Great, so we put all of these together. I'm going to hit next, and now we have our application prepared for us so that we can actually get started with coding it. So the very first thing I want to do in here is I actually want to make myself some outlets in my storyboard. So I'm going to head into my main.storyboard. In the main.storyboard, once the storyboard loads up in here, I'm going to get myself a little bit of a space. And in the space I created, I want to add myself a label and I want to add myself a button. So here I'm going to go ahead and say from the library on the top, I have a label. So I put that there. And then from the library on the top, I have a button. As we discussed earlier on, don't worry about setting the right sizes or the constraints or making sure everything looks really good. For now, I will show you that in really, next few lessons. Before doing any of this, you just want to get a sense of how things, they basically work. So for that reason, for now, I'm just going to make my button look like this. That is simply just having some size for it. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to change the background color of it to, let's say, this color. And I'm going to make the text color of it to be black, for instance. So that part is taken care of. And then I have my label. I'm going to do a very similar thing in here. I'm going to place it around there. I'm going to say the text of it is aligned to the center. The text of it, I'm going to make it white. And I'm going to make the background of it black. So we have these two objects or these two outlets, and we somehow want to connect them to our code. I want two things to happen. One is when I launch the application, I want this label to say hello. The other thing I want to happen is when I press the button, I want this label to say my name. So we see two different interactions. One interaction at the moment the application loads, the other interaction when a button has been tapped upon. So before doing anything, let's run this application on my simulator. And as you can see, I'm running this on iPhone 11. And because of that, I'm actually going to go ahead up here and I'm going to say, give me an iPhone 11 simulator. And I'm going to run my application. And once it runs, it has to launch my simulator. And on the simulator, I should be able to see my label and my button. But at the moment, really, there is no interaction with either of them. So let's go ahead and see how we could actually interact with them. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my code area, which is my view controller.swift. And in my view controller.swift, I'm going to go ahead and write some code. The very first thing is I want to get rid of all of these comments. And you will see in the future, if you're not familiar with coding, that this is a way for us to write some notes for ourselves. So we can entirely get rid of them. So I'm going to get rid of all of these things. I want to keep the import. Then I want to come in here. I want to keep the view did load, and I will talk about it in a second. And I want to get rid of these other comments as well. You don't really have to do this, but I do it because I like my code to be really, really clean and very easy to read. Then I'm going to come after my class definition, and that's something that we will talk about in more details in the future. I want to get myself a new line somewhere about here, and I want to write this at IB outlet, and then weak variable, let's call it my label, UI label. Now, don't worry about exactly how things are working right now. These early lessons, I just want you to build a little bit of a confidence by making things work. But after a while, I will explain to you why do we do things in a certain way and what do they mean. But for now, you can just kind of follow me along and make sure that it works for you. So I made myself an IB outlet, variable, my label, UI label. In a nutshell, I'm just saying that there is a label and I'm calling it my label. And now using this IB outlet is going to expose it to our storyboard. Let's see how that's going to work. I'm going to head back to my storyboard. And in my storyboard, I'm going to go ahead and in here, I actually want to see my connection editor. What I want to be doing is I want to select this little icon, which is called the files owner of the view controller. So when you select that, it basically connects to the class of this view controller. And again, if you are not familiar what is the class, don't worry about that. We will come to that in future lessons. What you want to learn in here is that you select that little view controller and then you go to the top right corner. This one is called the connection inspector. If you go over it, it says the connection inspector. You want to click on the connection inspector and you should see my label, the one that we created, as an outlet in here, which is basically a way for us to connect this outlet to anyone in here. And when I try to drag and drop it, it actually works in a very smart way. When I try to drag it over a button, it doesn't highlight that button. But when I try to drop it over a label, it actually says, yes, you can connect it in here because my label is of the type label. And this outlet that you're trying to connect to is also of the type label. So I'm going to go ahead and drop it in here, which now means this label in the interface builder has been connected to an outlet called my label, which is actually here in my code. And because the two of them are connected, we can see this little connection field, and it means that we can actually do different stuff with them. For instance, I could go ahead and do this. I could go ahead and say, when I come to this function, view did load, do this, my label dot text say hello. Now, what is this? We will talk about these in far more details in the future. These are basically called lifecycle functions. The one thing that you want to learn right now is this view did load happens when the application loads. Whenever the application just loads and you see the interface, this function and whatever is in the body of it will automatically run. That's all you need to know about right now. That anything that comes after the super.viewDidLoad will automatically happen when the application launches. And if that's true, we should be able to see hello on this label right at the very beginning. Let's see if that's going to happen. I'm going to run my application. We're going to wait for the simulator to load, and then it says hello at the very top, which is exactly what we expected to see in here. So this was obviously one way of connecting different pieces of outlets to our code. But I want to show you another way, which is perhaps a much simpler way. To do that, let me first go ahead and get rid of this current connection. So I'm going to get rid of this label. And I'm doing this by intention because I want to show you something that happens. So you probably want to do the same thing as well. So I'm going to get rid of that. And if you do that, you're obviously going to get this error because it says, I don't know what is my label. You don't have anything called my label. And that's perfectly fine. I'm going to get rid of that piece of code as well. And now, even though everything seems to be okay, if I try to run this application, it will actually crash. And this is a kind of crash that every iOS developer has seen multiple times. Now let's go ahead and see what we did wrong. So to go back to my code, I'm going to go on the top and here on Navigator, I'm going to go to my code, and in here, or to rather to my Project Explorer, I'm going to go back to View Controller, and the error isn't anywhere in here. If you want, you can actually read the error that is giving you in there, and it tells you what's going on. It says that there is no code compliant value for my label. So apparently someone is still thinking there is my label, and I tell you who that is. If you head to your main storyboard and if you select this file's owner view controller, it will actually tell you that it is still trying to connect to my label. That's because that connection didn't get deleted in here when we deleted the code. I wanted to show you this because I've seen this happening many times to people, including myself, because at times we remove a code or we remove an outlet and then it's still exposed in here even though it is not there anymore. So keep that in mind, that whenever you delete something from your code, you must remove the connection in here as well. So I'm going to get rid of the connection, that entirely disappears. So we're kind of back to a default mode that we had about 10 minutes ago. We don't have the my label in here, and we don't have an exposure of it in here as well. And now we actually want to make this in a different way and perhaps an easier way. To do that, I want to use my assistive editor window. To call the assistive editor window, we click on this little plus button on the top corner of the editor, and that basically adds a new editor. So right now I have one editor. If I tap on that, it basically makes it two editors. Let me get rid of these windows and you will see that I have the editor in here and I have another one in here. Right now it's kind of meaningless because on the left I have my storyboard and also on the right I have my storyboard, but that's not really what I want. What I want is I want to have my code in one side and my interface builder on the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load back my Project Explorer, and in here on the left side I'm going to show my view controller. So now on the left I have my view controller, the code, the Swift code, and on the right I have my storyboard. And now I can actually make the connections between these two by using drag and drop. When you're using drag and drop, keep in mind that you have to hold the control button. Let's see how that works. I'm going to grab the label, I'm going to hold the control button, I'm going to drag it over to my code and drop it in here. When I drop it, this little window pops and it asks me, what kind of connection do you want to make? I want to make an outlet for it, and the name of that outlet, I want to put it as my new label, or anything that you want to call it. Last time we called it simply my label. You can do that, or we can call it my new label. And it says what's the storage type, and it is weak. And if you hit connect, we will actually get exactly the same thing as we wrote manually. IB outlet, the weak variable, my new label of the type UI label. So that's a much easier way of connecting outlets and user interface objects together. I'm going to make another one for my button, and I'm going to drag it, drop it in here. Then I'm going to go to my connection, and in here we'll see something interesting, and that is the connection type can either be an outlet or an action. Let me explain to you why that is happening. An object such as a label can only do something, that is basically showing something on it. But an object such as a button, it can basically do things such as causing interactions. That is when a user taps on it, for instance. So I can actually go ahead and make my connection to be of the type action, and I'm going to call this one my action, which basically says whenever somebody touches up on this button, you run this action. So let's see how that's going to work. I'm going to get rid of this assistive window. In here it has a new function. This function in a way is similar to this function. They both start with function, they both have a name. This one has some arguments, and it also is exposed to the IB action, and we will talk about all of these details in the future when we talk about functions and methods and classes and basically object-oriented programming. But for now, just learn that whenever you have one of these, it means whenever that button is called, we actually get to run whatever it is inside these two curly brackets. And what I want to do is this. I want to go ahead and say my new label dot text becomes my name. And remember, we said at the very beginning we wanted my new label to show me hello. So I'm going to say do hello. And now let's go ahead and run our application on our simulator. If it all goes well, when the application loads, we should see hello as we did, and then we should press the button and see this guy change to my name or to your name basically. I'm going to press that and it actually becomes that. And that's exactly what we expected to see. So a quick recap to create the connections between the outlets and the user interface elements. What you want to be doing is you want to introduce your outlets and actions, and then you want to go back to your storyboard, which is basically in here. And in your storyboard, what you want to be doing is you want to select your files owner. From the files owner, you want to go to the connection inspector and then connect them properly to one another. That would be one way of doing it. The other way of doing it would be, instead of writing things here manually, we would actually drag and drop them between two open windows of the application. And to get the two open windows, what we do is we actually go in here to our little editor on the right assistive window. Once we do that, we get two copies of the editor. Let me get rid of this. And then we could actually open two different files. And if we do that, then we can easily drag and drop between the two of them using the control button. So that's pretty much it for this lesson. We managed to make some outlets, we managed to connect them together, and we managed to make some different events happening depending on whether the application is loading or whether the application or the user has actually tapped the button on an application. Now let's keep it up to here. Let's move on to our next few lessons where we expand on this and we make a few different types of outlets basically.